And Dr. Hall, I'm a fan. I've watched your work at the Council of Economic Advisors. I welcome you to your new role, and thank you for being willing to step up and help us. This is a great conversation. I want to follow up on Senator Kane's direction. Obviously, we've just gone through a budget cycle. I don't think anybody on this committee is really ecstatic about the process. Our chairman and ranking member did a great job with a budget. But the long-term thing that really concerns me is our ability to address this debt. And I want to follow up on Senator Kane. I think he's headed in the right direction. And I want to commend him on the nonpartisan approach I think a lot of people are taking in this committee with regard to the question. I think you didn't mention interest rate models, and obviously the uncertainty around interest rates have a large impact on what happens with how we manage the debt. But I'm really interested how you can help us look at the alternatives we have to address the debt issue. Like Senator King says, we'll deal with the policy issues, but one of those is particularly of interest to several of us in here. And I know I've heard Senator Whitehouse talk about this and a few others on the other side, and that is redundant agencies, agencies that are actually totally duplicative of other agencies. The GAO comes out with a report. They quantify some, they don't quantify others. And I know that they can't really estimate savings without some help from the CBO or some reports from the CBO. Can you address how you're looking at maybe interfacing with some of these other agencies in terms of helping us answer some of the questions we're dealing with, specifically with regard to the debt?
So you're talking about looking at sort of what they're saying about the debt?
Yeah, and what would be the potential models around reduction or elimination of some of these, or changes, really, in mandates around some of these duplicative agencies that the GAO estimates or identifies every year?
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, certainly the sort of thing that we can do is look at the possible effects of doing some of that work, the effect on the budget of eliminating some of this overlap and et cetera. That's the sort of thing that's I think is sort of in our wheelhouse. So we get an idea perhaps of some specific ideas on that we could do some work on that.
So let's go to dynamic scoring then. What are the risks? I mean, I know this is one of several measures that you would use in evaluating any change. Talk to us about how we should be thinking about that relative to looking at ways to reduce the debt, with regard specifically about growing the economy and doing some things on the public side or private side that would help generate growth in the economy.
Well, sure. Certainly, that's one of the things about the macroeconomic work that we've been doing is sort of looking at the possible macroeconomic effects of some policy spending or taxation. You know, it's the sort of thing where it's very difficult to make these estimates. There's a lot of uncertainty, but there actually is pretty good consensus on some of these issues that there is some macroeconomic effect, there is some growth effects going forward, and it's certainly true if you're looking at a federal debt or federal budget deficit. There's sort of three things that are important there, right? It's spending, it's revenues, but it's also economic growth. And so that's sort of a third thing that we're trying to take into account with a dynamic aspect. It's just a difficult thing to do for policies, but it's certainly an important thing. And you'll see that actually in our forecasts, especially our long-term forecasting, how much if we change some of the assumptions on something like productivity growth, how much that makes a difference in the debt going forward.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Switching over to just an oversight question, you mentioned that you were pleased with what you found so far coming in after 59 days. Give us a sense operationally of how you think we should think about the CBO's effectiveness in terms of dealing with new things that we're asking you to do, like dynamic scoring and others. Right. Given the organization, the people you have, the challenges you have of retention, and the things that you've already mentioned, but going forward as we look at dealing with this debt over the next few years, what do we need to be thinking about relative to CBO's resources, capabilities, and what we're asking you to do? Do we need to look at priorities? Are we asking too many things and that sort of thing?
Okay. Well, certainly one important thing for a place like CBO is to always have a certain amount of their time and resources set aside for developing new methodologies. And right now, I think the two things I mentioned, dynamic scoring and especially healthcare, those are really new areas. And so for a lot of the CBO work, we're sort of taking the consensus of economic science and applying that. And something like healthcare, we're sort of creating it. We're on the frontier of that. So we've got to spend a considerable amount of time ourselves trying to develop the modeling and such, and just having some resources where we can do that and vet that work is very important. And then, of course, just setting priorities for us. You know, one of the things that's really clear is we get more requests than we could possibly handle at times. And having some guidance as to which ones we should move on first is very, very helpful for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.